Hi there, and welcome to Get NIST-Y, the webinar series that breaks compliance out of the checkbox trap and turns it into a real security advantage. No fluff, no FUD, just practical strategies to make compliance work for your MSP. I'm Jared Kasner, and I'm joined by my co-founder of Blacksmith InfoSec and co-host of Get NIST-Y, Michael Zabarski. Today, our special guest is Mike Ellerhorst, CEO of NTM Advisory, a vCISO consultancy. Mike, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jared. Thanks for having me here today. Appreciate it. So I would say I enjoy solving problems at the intersection of business and technology, and have found that I view the world and really succeed in helping others understand the world through a risk-based lens. So with NTM Advisory, we help organizations, primarily small and medium-sized businesses, navigate the maze of cybersecurity risk.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, Mike. So today our topic, most MSPs treat compliance like a box to check, and that's exactly why they're leaving money on the table. In this episode, we're going to dive into what MSPs are getting wrong, why compliance is the key to stronger client relationships, and how shifting your approach can unlock huge business opportunities. I'd say, at this point, we got to do a mic check. Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. I think you're both here. So yep. Good luck to either one of you figuring out which mic I'm talking about as I ask questions here. But Mike, why don't you go ahead and tell us, compliance is not a one-time checklist item, but an ongoing process. So what does that mean to you, and how do we help MSPs deliver value to their clients?
Yeah. So I think I think a lot of this has to do with just ongoing engagement. You can't get someone to compliance and then drop it, because they will very quickly drop out of compliance. And so staying engaged, especially for a business that is not does not have the internal bandwidth to run security, kind of coaching them along the way and making sure that they're doing their risk register reviews, they're doing their user audits, that they're doing all those continuing tasks that you need to get to. Yeah, Mike, what about you? What have you seen?
Yeah, I think, when I think about compliance, it's kind of like risk, in that you're never done. When you start a business, you start it, and you're never done until you close your business. And you can invest more time and energy into it, or choose to not invest time and energy into it, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And so when you think about from an MSP relationship with a client, it is something that your clients are always dealing with. And even as an MSP, you are dealing with it as well. So like continuing and making it more part of the relationship, as opposed to transactional with a checkbox, a list that you need to go through once a year, twice a year, whatever it is, that helps change and reframe the mindset from a one-time to an ongoing, part of the relationship, part of doing business.
Yeah, and I guess the follow-up or obvious follow-up question to that is, how do you build that trust with your client, right? If your client is a doctor's office and you're trying to advise them on how to run their business, like how do you help them? How do you help that as an MSP that doctor understand that you don't know just about IT, that you actually can be a trusted partner in the broader scheme of things?
It might sound a little bit corny, but like, be genuine and be genuinely interested in your clients. Ask them questions. Ask them how their business is doing. What are their competitors doing? What are they worried about? What are they, how are they growing? And just listen. And listen for the key components. So if you're engaging with your client, your business owner, the CFO, the CEO, they don't speak IT language, they don't speak compliance language. So as the MSP, part of your job is to interpret what are those business challenges, what are those business objectives, and how do those connect to the risk framework that you're trying to help them implement, the compliance obligations that may exist for a healthcare provider. They may have heard of HIPAA compliance, but they're not an expert. You're the expert, right? So as you're hearing, we want to do this, we want to do that, as the MSP, in order to build that trust-based relationship, you can respond and say, oh, that's really awesome. That's exciting that you want to add this, new offering. We should also talk about what that means from a data privacy perspective and a compliance perspective, because we want to make sure that we're protecting your business investment and your business growth.
Yeah, and I think the other piece is any sort of IT department, whether it's internal IT or managed service provider, their general function is to make a business operate better, faster, cheaper. And the way to do that is to understand what they're trying to do and what they're achieving, and then how do you fit into that, and what processes can you expedite, what can you do to basically make it so that that business runs smoother. And part of that is going to be getting the compliant technical aspects of compliance in place, but also talking to them about the organizational aspects of compliance. Again, talking to them about what are their concerns. Sure, there's going to be cybersecurity risks, but what are their strategic risks or financial risks? So again, staying engaged and building that trust to show them that you're not just concerned about making sure their computers work, you're concerned making sure that their organization runs smoother and in a more secure fashion.
I love that, Mike. And also, sorry, Jared, I was just going to respond and say, like, you make such a good point in that there's only part of the responsibility that MSPs can do, right? The client is operating their processes, their business processes. They have a role in technical processes. So understanding the why and then also helping them understand the why is so critical to achieve the efficiency, the cost savings, the value that is on your marketing materials, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you two are kind of hitting the nail on the head here. When we talk about risk, it comes across as FUD too often, right? When we fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And really, if you're an MSP and you're selling based on FUD, the next person who can come in and sell on that FUD and scare their clients or your clients better than you can is going to take that business away from you, right? But if you're instead talking about using those risks as how you're helping them drive their business and driving business efficiency and operational growth or organizational growth, that really gives you that opportunity to say, look, the compliance framework that you've chosen, whether it's something that you've been forced to do like HIPAA or something that you're choosing to do like NIST cybersecurity framework or CIS controls, those things can help you actually be that value-added service for your business and drive things forward. And so I guess Mike, either one of you, what does that look like? How have you seen this go really, really smoothly with your clients or with your MSP partners?
Yeah, Mike, you want to take a first stab at it and I'll follow up?
Yeah, sure. Jared, you're going to have to start using last names or something. I think so fear, uncertainty, and doubt it's such a conundrum because it works, right? Like, fear is a really powerful motivator to human beings. That's just part of our psychological wiring. And so I think as much as, the three of us have had a number of conversations around this topic, and I think none of us like that, that approach, that lead in. But I think the reality is there are going to be, MSPs, there are going to be competitors that do that. And so when I think about the flip side of it, you have to show the value. And to me, a lot of that can be used in the language of trust, where when you build a trust-based relationship, they don't have to think about the things that they've offloaded to the MSP. That frees up, some of their own mental capacity, some of their leadership team, business strategy time to focus on other things. On the other thing about why it's important and why there's value in implementing controls and, achieving compliance is establishing that trust in your systems, right? Trusting that if we have a system failure, if a disk fails, I have trust that we have built in resilience. We have backups that we can recover from in a period of time. And I know my business is not going to be substantially impacted, right? It's that was not the Tuesday morning I was anticipating, but it's not oh my gosh, are we going to be able to make payroll next month? So like that's the it's the peace of mind, perhaps. And I think that's a term and the phrase that I use a lot, especially with small and medium-sized businesses, of, what's keeping you up at night, the proverbial what's keeping you up at night. But like, if you had peace of mind, what else would you be able to do? What else would you try and drive with your business?
Yeah,
well,
I think
treating data backups, to use that analogy, like an insurance policy, right? It's you don't buy life insurance because you're worried about dying tomorrow. You buy life insurance because you want to make sure that your family is taken care of, just in case something bad happens, right? You're anticipate good outcomes, but plan for bad outcomes, right? And the same idea is true with cyber insurance, but even the small little things with disaster recovery, like how do we build in the resilience so we don't need to have that insurance policy, but also how do we make sure that we have the data backups and following the 1, 2, 3 side of things from a data backup standpoint to make sure that in the event of a disaster, it is not a disaster, right? And Zabarski, I interrupted you there. Why don't you go ahead and share your thoughts?
Yeah, no worries. The other piece of that is also how do you kind of bulk up, I'll say, the processes they have in place, right? So a lot of times I've run tabletop exercises for companies. They'll say, oh, well, this can't happen because we have this process in place. I'm like, cool, but what happens when the process fails? And usually not a good answer. And so one thing that I'll say is going through and, for example, doing user access reviews. Sometimes your clients will forget to tell you when somebody leaves the organization. And so if you're proactively saying, hey, here's everyone who's active in the organization, then they can say yes, or they'll say, no, wait, hold on a second. Like, Sally's not active. She left the organization 2 weeks ago. And so you can, again, close that communication loop and build that trust to say, hey, even if your process fails, we have a process at the MSP that will plug that hole and make sure that Sally is offboarded in a semi-timely fashion, depending on how often you're doing this user access reviews. The other thing that really helps is if you're doing user access reviews on things that you guys don't manage. So again, just sitting down with the accounting team and saying, cool, let's go look at your accounting system and do a user access review there. Now you're no longer saying, hey, let's secure the stuff we're responsible for. You're saying, hey, let's build that security muscle in your organization. Let's secure your whole organization. And also get the organization, again, going back to cybersecurity and compliance is not an MSP or IT issue. It is an organizational issue. And so you need to get the organization involved. And that's a great way to start getting that organization involved, is start those user access reviews and things that you guys don't manage, but nudge them into the way so they start doing those things on their HR system, accounting system, to HIP organization, EHR systems, etc.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I think a good place for us to segue a little bit here, right? What you're talking about is really a deeper client engagement, and so how do you build and foster the relationship with your clients to drive things? Because at the end of the day, if you have a poor relationship with your client, you're gonna lose out, and so how do we make sure that we are building those relationships, that we are strengthening those ties, that we are not just showing up at a QBR or when something breaks, but as an MSP, showing up every day and being there for our clients and helping them drive better business decisions.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up QBRs, Jared. I have a bone to pick about QBRs. There's a lot of MSPs that complain about their QBR process, their own internal process, because they can't get the client engagement. They come in, they have the stack of folders, that they have all the statistics. Hey, we blocked this many cyber attacks, we blocked this many spam emails, we blocked this many viruses, this many password unlocks, etc. And they're like, we can't get our client to engage with us. They don't care. They skip the QBRs. They're just not interested. And if you kind of flip the script of the QBR, and instead of coming in with all those statistics, bring them with you. You can give them as a nice handout at the end. But instead of just saying, hey, here's everything we've done for you, talk to them about what they've done. Ask, hey, what were the last quarter objectives for your business? How'd you do on them? What are you doing for next quarter? How can we help with that? How can we put in IT processes or tools or whatever else to enable the business to do that? And those QBRs will go from lack of engagement to a lot more engaged. And again, building trust, getting into the compliance mindset to say, hey, looks like you're looking to sign a contract with the hospital. This is your first healthcare organization. You're going to need to sign a BAA. Let's get you the HIPAA compliance so that you can sign that BAA safely and not take on risk of signing a BAA when you're not HIPAA compliant. Stuff like that, right? Looks like you have a bunch of clients that are starting to ask you for your SOC 2. Great, let's get you on the road to SOC 2. So because that's going to translate into more money and more contracts for you. And we're not just going to do SOC 2 for the sake of doing SOC 2, but because it's going to be a way to drive more business for you.
Yeah, I love it. And I agree with you on the bone to pick for QBRs, but I would say in how they're typically run, I think they can be incredibly valuable. And the fact that they're often built into services agreements actually gives you a justified reason to get in front of your buyer, your executive on a quarterly basis. I love what you talked about, Mike, around kind of reframing it a little bit and asking about the business. I encourage, my MSP clients to make sure that you're doing your homework. For public clients, read their analyst reports. For any clients, set up Google alerts or set up news alerts for your client and any of their competitors. So then when you come into that QBR, you can say, oh, I saw your press release a few weeks ago about XYZ. That's super cool. Tell me a little bit more about, how that went or how things are going based upon it. The other thing that I have only seen with one of my clients, but I love the idea, and I've thought about how I can integrate it with my own professional services, is leveraging referrals and references as part of the upsell process, right? I think references are often built in at that first engagement because the client doesn't know who you are and they want to chat with a couple people. But I think a QBR or related to a QBR could be a great opportunity for upsell if, like you were mentioning, Mike, one of your clients has been talking about going on the SOC 2 journey or going from a type 1 to a type 2. Like if you have other MSP clients that you have helped on that journey, maybe see if you could bring one of them in. You have to work through, making sure that they're both comfortable, coming into that type of conversation. But if you can play a connector and actually that's additional added value, right? That they're not paying for, but that you already have as part of your relationships. And if somebody hears, right, oh, you helped them, and this is all the great things that then occurred, that makes their buying decision so much easier.
Yep, absolutely. So one of the comments or complaints that I hear pretty regularly from MSPs is, hey, my clients don't show up to the QBRs. They won't even engage with it. They won't answer my phone calls when it comes to the QBR. Like, how do you get your clients to show up especially if you've had a history of the QBRs not being well attended because you've kind of fallen into the old traps and now you're moving into the new approach? Like, how do you start to let them know that the next QBR is going to be different and that there is value for them to show up to this, right? Because at the end of the day, if the QBR isn't adding value, then I don't blame your client to show. Like, it's just a checklist of like, I can send a checklist of or a readout of all the viruses that I've blocked in the statistics, but like add value, right? That process needs to be adding value.
Yeah. It's a tough question. It's an interesting one. And I would say, as with many things in life, setting the tone from the beginning is super powerful. So as part of onboarding, talk about what you typically look for and how you typically want to run QBRs. Ask for and kind of demand feedback from them of, do you agree with that? Does that sound like a good, a valuable meeting for us to have? Because if you're not getting that acknowledgement and agreement up front, then they have no skin in the game. They have not committed to anything aside from, signing a piece of paper with one more bullet on it. That conversation can give you the opportunity for adjusting your approach, adding in what's the hot topic of the month? Let's dissect a breach that happened, in your industry over the last quarter, right? Like there may be some educational things or something else that your client may really want to get out of that. And if you can find that 5-minute nugget of external value, they're going to show up for the rest, the other 45 minutes of this is how we are helping your organization. Once you're already in a relationship, it's a little bit, sometimes that reset is a little bit harder. I think potentially thinking about switching out, a client success manager or an account manager, is a good reset opportunity. At a calendar renewal at the beginning of the calendar year. Hey, people are talking about and thinking about, New Year's resolutions. Find an external anchor, even if it's artificial, to drive that. Hey, we're pivoting. It's the end of the summer. We're coming into the fall. We're starting, back to school reset. I don't know, right?
Yeah, no, Mike, I think you're right, and I think you can actually do that pivot somewhat smoothly, at least, where you can reach out and say, "Hey, we're redoing how we conduct QBRs. What we've been doing has not been working. Here's what we're doing. Here's what the things we want to cover. We want to hear from you about what's important to you and what you want to make sure is covered as well. But our agenda for the QBR and list it out, like what was completed last quarter? What are your business goals for the following quarter? Let's discuss how we can fit into those business goals, right? So if you send out the agenda ahead of time and just, again, as you said, Mike, do a reset and say, hey, let's start over.
Yeah.
Yep.
The other thing I would add is
there's Mike, to your point, there's a seasonal side of things, right? It's, hey, it's spring right now, or today is the first day of spring. So guess what? We're doing some spring cleaning with our QBR process. I love the back to school thing. It's, or I guess when you get into summer, it's, we're going to use sunlight as a disinfectant. Back to school. We went back to school to relearn how to do QBRs, right? New year, new you, however you want to phrase it, using those sort of calendar milestones or something as kind of your shtick. Like the marketing copy will write itself in a lot of ways, and if not, ChatGPT will write it for you. Not to offend any marketers out there, but like, we can, there are ways to kind of reset and jumpstart those relationships.
The other thing that I was going to say, Jared, is, and kind of looping back to very beginning of our conversation around relationships, is you should not be only meeting with your client 4 times a year, right? So if you do not have conversations with your client or various people within your client in between those QBRs, that's the first place to start. Because if there's no continuity in what that comms is, they are not looking at you as a partner. Why should they prioritize that hour, that 90 minutes over something else that they have been thinking about and they are worried about and they are prioritizing? So like, you have to approach the QBR as one of many tools in your ongoing relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Which sort of brings a nice, again, segue here. Thank you for teeing this up for me, whether you meant to or not. But, at the end of the day, we need to be developing these strategic relationships or strategic advisor and trusted advisor relationships with our clients, whether it's a doctor or a lawyer or anybody in between. Like at the end of the day, we need to build those relationships as IT professionals with our clients, so they know we're going to be there for them, rain or shine. We're going to be there for them every step of the way on that journey, and then we're able to provide a lot more than just the IT guidance. That there's compliance and regulatory advice that we can be providing to them. That there are like marketing advice, right? At the end of the day, you're, as an MSP, you're out there selling your business, and so a little bit about what's working for you from a marketing standpoint. How do you help your clients learn from your mistakes and successes on the marketing and sales and along the way? Right? These are all things that we can be doing, and so I'll turn it back over to Zabarsky here for a minute. What are some of the things that you do to help build those strategic relationships and become that trusted advisor to thinking back to your vCISO days or even in your capacity in Blacksmith? Like, how are you building those relationships and strengthening those relationships to drive things forward?
Yeah, a lot of it is again, as you get more and more engaged in it with a business, you find out more and more about what they're doing, what processes they have. And so as you try to help them solidify those processes, even when they're outside the scope of what you're doing, right? If I'm coming in as a vCISO, my main function is to say, hey, let's talk security and let's get you compliant. But then you hear that a team within the organization is printing 1,000-page PDF so they can sign the last page and then rescan 1,000-page PDF back in. Like, full stop. Let's talk about how we fix this process. This process is just broken. Or, hey, there's an accounting process that's going on, and this money's wasted. We just did a big thing at our organization where we streamline the accounting process. Let's see if we can implement those same ideas for your organization and help you guys out, right? One great example, again, it's compliance or security related, is with wire fraud, right? How many MSPs are going in and saying, hey, what's your process for issuing wires and also changing wiring instructions? Making sure that there's a process that someone can't just go in and call and have John Accounting change it. Make sure that John Accounting is calling a good known contact number, making sure that somebody else is looking at it as well. Like, you can implement these other processes outside of security and compliance and outside of IT to help their departments kind of streamline the organization. One of the big things that, from a compliance and security standpoint, that I've seen that has helped me is mapping out their processes to better understand them. And the easiest way to do that is work on a BCP plan with them. So say, hey, let's talk about all your business processes, all the systems that are involved, all the people that are involved, and then let's start poking holes. What happens if Jared goes on vacation? How does this process break? Oh, he doesn't have a number 2 to take care of whatever. Great, let's figure out who the number 2 is going to be, right? Not all these are going to be IT and security processes. A lot of this is going to be business, and they're going to see that value.
Yeah, well, and this is one of the great things about SOC 2, and also one of the bad things about SOC 2, right? When you get into some of these compliance frameworks, they're not just looking at IT controls; they're looking at HR controls and good governance controls, right? Do you have a board of directors, and does your board of directors actually meet on a regular basis, and do you have meeting minutes from it, right? They're not actually looking for the contents of the board meetings. What they want to know is, are they meeting? Are they talking about things? Are they actually evaluating risk? Same thing with your HR processes. Like, how are you onboarding people? How are you offboarding people? What are you doing with that? And at Blacksmith, we usually talk about it as compliance being say it, do it, prove it. Right? The idea is you have to have a process, like Mike was talking about. You have to be able to do that and execute that process. And then you have to be able, from a compliance standpoint, prove that you're following that process. At the end of the day, and I ran into this all the time in my past lives as a CTO at healthcare organizations and finance organizations, as we're going through a SOC 2 audit, having my CEO say, well, why do they care about what our HR processes are? Okay, well, let's talk about that. Like, how do we not become, there was the organization that recently came out, recently is not that recent, but where they hired a North Korean actor by accident as an engineer, and then kind of teased out, I think it was KnowBe4, where they kind of teased out the process of how they determined that it was a North Korean fake person. But if you don't have good HR practices, guess what? Now all of a sudden you've opened your door to corporate espionage. Mike talked about wire fraud and the capacity for somebody to come in. It's like the majority of hacking anymore is not really hacking the way we thought about it in the 90s of some guy in a black hoodie hunched over a computer, Trump's 400-pound guy in his basement or his mom's basement, right? Like, that's not the majority of hacking anymore. It's social engineering. It's getting on the phone and saying, and tricking people into divulging information. And so helping like streamline all of those business processes and letting people know, like, cybersecurity is not just about the bits and the bytes. It's about having your employees understand the why behind all this stuff. And so, Ellerhorst, you're a vCISO, so you work with lots of different companies and help advise them on risk strategies and business process strategies. What are some of the things that you're seeing that might help MSPs and allow them to kind of drive some of those conversations also?
Yeah, you guys brought up great points, and you maybe see a knowing nod. It's like, yep, I have a story for that. perhaps a different angle or another thing to think about is being very thoughtful and being very observant of when you try to have those conversations, because trying to do that too soon before you've established a level of trust and a level of credibility and a level of delivery excellence and quality, instead of being met with oh yeah, let's talk about these other parts of the business, you're going to be met by a suspicious of, why do you care about that? That's not what I hired you for. And even if you get out over your skis, so to say, like, it may tank your existing contract, because if you try and help in an area where they don't actually need help, or they're not as, or you're not as much of an expert, and then you have an accidental slip up, or one of your team members leaves and you have to manage a transition, right? It could give a justification for them to move away. So while, and this is something that I've learned the hard way, where actually, one of my clients brought me in to help rewrite a data retention policy. And it was very short, very small dollar. But as part of the very first introduction, they mentioned that they, as a digital marketing firm, they had some, a little bit of a technology platform. They were thinking about a SOC 1, and I think he mentioned by the end of the year, which was, 4 or 5 months away. And after I finished that first policy, which I thought we did a good job on, it was like, all right, when do you want to get started on SOC 2? When do you want to and I was doing it with positive intent. I knew I knew the journey the company needed to go through to get to a SOC 2 compliance. And it wasn't a 2-week exercise. And so I was operating and trying to encourage a sense of urgency, but that was actually met with in the wrong way. And I ended up losing that client. And even though I think I did a good job, I met what was on the paper, and I was operating with positive intent, it was not what they wanted, because I hadn't built that trust for having those next conversations.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
Yeah, that trust building exercise is absolutely critical. And at the end of the day, selling compliance is hard, right? Like, you wait, you want me to do what now? And how long is it going to take? And it's going to cost me what? I don't want to spend that much money, right? And so instead of, I guess, Mike Sabarsky, like, instead of selling SOC 2 or going straight to a SOC 2 type 2, what are some of the things that you've learned along the way to help kind of guide that journey that at the end of the day might end up attaining a SOC 2 or might end up at least aligning with whether it's NIST-CSF or CIS or SOC 2 or ISO, whatever, like getting them to align with that framework and sort of build the trust along the way?
Yeah, I think the first thing you really need to do is understand like what the business is doing and what kind of compliance requirements they may have, right? So start with, is there anything that they're required to do? SOC 2, no one's going to require them to do other than people they're contracting with. But whether it's like HIPAA or 800-171 or CMMC, there's others that they're going to just be required to do if you're in New York DFS, etc. And so step one is identifying if there's an actual regulatory need, because that already goes to building that trust. If you can identify that and go to them and say, hey, are you aware that you need to do this? And then, so if you can do that, great. If they don't have any sort of regulatory needs, just going in there and saying, hey, let's discuss how we strategically put security controls into your organization to make you guys more secure, and not just do the shotgun approach of, shoot everywhere and see how many holes we can plug. And like, let's look at this strategically and figure out what makes sense. What doesn't make sense, we'll put in a risk register, we'll identify it, figure out what we're going to do with that later. But it really gives you that kind of structured approach to putting that security program together. And you'll go through and you'll say, hey, let's not worry about this part right now. Let's get the basics in place and check off these things. And as you go, if you're already mapping to a compliance framework, you can very easily show them progress towards them being more compliant, more secure, etc. And it ends up being a business enabler for them at some point. Even if there's no regulatory framework today that they have to do, there will be at some point, realistically. There's different states that are putting stuff in place. New York has regulatory requirements. Massachusetts has regulatory requirements for any business doing business in Massachusetts. So it's coming down the line faster than they would like. And so going through identifying things and saying, hey, let's get you started. We don't need to do everything in week one. But what I'm trying to avoid is for something to come down the line and say, hey, you have to be compliant by next year. And all of a sudden, you're just throwing money at the problem. This way, you can kind of take little steps towards it, getting more and more compliant. And then when something does come down, you're like, cool, you're 95% of the way there. Let's get you the rest of the 5% and you're good to go.
Yeah, I love that concept of shifting from being reactive to proactive. And if you can use an analogy in personal life, if you make a connection with them and they love to go camping, you could say, have you ever been camping and you forgot to bring, tarp, whatever, and well, next time, doing some of that checklist, preparing ahead of time, makes sure that you have a better experience in camping, right? And if you can think about and tie that to their business, that then helps show them the value of doing it before they have to. It may not work. It doesn't always work, right? Yeah. But it at least shows that, and to our comments earlier, right? It gets out of that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and it can differentiate the way that you are talking about compliance compared to other of your competitors.
Well, and the analogy I often use is your retirement account, right? At the end of the day, if you're waiting to fund your retirement account until you're, 55, 60 years old, guess what? You're going to be just pouring money into it because you haven't had the value of compounding. Security is the same way, right? If you wait until a contract demands it or regulation shows up and you haven't done anything, you're going to be throwing good money after bad, trying to play catch up and get in the things in the right place. If instead you are starting to invest in your security program early, you're starting to think holistically about what that security program entails, and that's where the frameworks come into play. Is they are good guides to help you figure out what good security looks like and drive things forward. You can actually invest a smaller total, like your total cost of ownership goes way down because you're making these investments slowly over time. You can take the approach of, hey, rather than trying to boil the ocean and pick all of the tools right now and as quickly as I possibly can, where you're maybe not going to make the best decisions, you can pick one tool at a time and say, all right, we're going to start with endpoint protection. And what is that endpoint protection tool? And let's go get best of breed at a price point that we can afford. This can scale it. And we can do this one step at a time. And again, to Mike Z's point, to Zavarsky's point, if I can show in my QBRs or regular status checks or whatever, hey, on January 1st, you were 37% compliant, and on April 1st, you're 83% compliant. Look at how much progress we've made just in a quarter. And your investment, by the way, has not been that great because you've made these small changes. That's going to go a long way. But the other thing that I find really valuable is if you are making those investments, not just in the tools, but also in the processes, right? If you're starting to bake in the process, so you're, again, that mindset in your business is, how do I be a safer custodian of data? Again, with the idea that the hacker anymore is calling your employees and trying to get them to, or texting them or trying to get them to do something. It's that social engineering component, right? If you can get your employees and staff to start thinking about the why behind all of these processes and have that kind of baked into your culture, guess what? When the next type of attack comes out that we haven't even dreamed about yet, your staff is going to already know how to deal with that because they've already, that's baked into the culture of your organization and part of who you are and into your DNA. And so these are all really valuable place to grow. So,
Jared, I want to say one more thing on that. Sorry for interrupting, but on the process thing, most MSPs and IT departments know this, but change fatigue is real. So if you're boiling the ocean, you're going to have a revolution from your employees. So again, just doing it little by little, it's a lot easier to implement.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Mike. Good call out there. In the interest of time, because I know we wanted to try to keep this to about 45 minutes today, I do have some audience questions. And so we'll stay on that topic of change fatigue. or rather how to avoid it. But if you could change one thing as an MSP in the next 30 days, what would you do to improve how you approach compliance with your clients?
Yeah, I would start again by becoming that actual strategic partner and building that trust. I would start with changing up my QBRs. Just start that conversation, change how you check in with people. Don't make it a data dump for them. I would find out what they're doing and what they want to do and go from there. Mike, what about you?
Yeah.
I think my advice would be either refresh a kind of compliance baseline pulse check or do it for the first time and start that conversation or re-anchor that conversation. And if you can say, hey, we want to redo this to see how we've helped you improve in the last amount of time.
Cool. Yeah, that's helpful. Hopefully answers the audience member's question. I've got a next question from the audience. So what is the biggest challenge positioning compliance as a value add rather than just an obligation? Eleanor, why don't you start this time?
Yeah, this is a tough one for sure. Some of it, and I think it's worth acknowledging that there are some people, there are some buyers, there's some business owners that are not going to change the way that they think about compliance. And you have to understand that going in and be comfortable saying, okay, you don't want to do compliance. This is the risk. You can communicate, over email so that you are meeting your contractual obligations. But like if literally, right, you're not gonna teach a fish how to climb a tree. So if there's no appetite there, then either be okay with that or potentially plan to roll off that client, right? The other thing I would say, and we've hit on it so many times today, but just again, is like anchoring back in the why. And I think so many times your clients, your buyers don't understand the true why behind compliance. Why were these frameworks put in place? Why have these frameworks evolved over time? And using examples helps to explain that why. Awesome.
Mike, anything to add?
No, that was pretty comprehensive. I think the only other thing I would add would be as far as a value add, again, if you understand the business, right, you can position compliance as a value add. So think of you as the MSP yourself, right? Right now, if you have no compliance framework that you're mapping your own security program against, and instead you go through and you map against SOC 2 and you become SOC 2 certified, is that a value add? Now, I'm not advocating that everyone should be SOC 2 certified by any stretch of the imagination. But if it helps you secure business, then the expense becomes worth it, right? If it's not going to help you secure business, then it's not worth it, and you should pick NIST-CSF or something else. No matter what you do, especially as an MSP, building out your own security program and becoming compliant with something will go a long way, because then you can demonstrate that to your clients and build trust with them that way, saying, hey, we've got processes in place. We know how to run a rigorous security program. We know how to be secure, and we're going to help you get there as well.
Awesome. And so that maybe already answers the question, or the next question on my list, but if you give one piece of advice to another MSP struggling with compliance, what would it be?
Get compliance yourself. So there are ways to do it, right? We're happy to hop on calls and chat with you about if you guys have compliance needs. We can answer any questions you guys have. But the reality of it is, you've got to start the journey somewhere. And so whether it's engaging with a vCISO firm like NTM to say, hey, can you guys come in and kind of lead us, or whether it's getting a platform like Blacksmith that helps guide you as well, or a mix of the two. There's different ways you can start that journey. But the important thing is to start it and start doing something today, and then go from there.
I'm going to break it and say I'm going to give two pieces of advice. The first piece of advice is really think about internally, do you want to deliver compliance? Because you can be a really solid and good MSP without a compliance offering. And I think that's incredibly important to be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, yes, we are going to go on this journey. And I, as the business owner of an MSP, believe in the value of supporting our clients in this way. And then the second piece of advice I would say is reach out to your peers. Like Mike said, the MSP community is incredible, and there are a lot of people. While yes, there is competition, I like to think about it much more as like co-opetition, where there are people that will help share their own stories and give you examples of what worked for them and what didn't work for them, and you don't have to go the journey alone.
Awesome, thanks. Well, gentlemen, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. Mike, thanks for being the overachiever with two pieces of advice for us to close things off here. For those of you watching, join us next month when we'll be joined by our friends from LionGuard to talk about the drivers of compliance in 2025 and beyond. Is it going to come from regulatory changes, from insurance providers, or from small businesses themselves? Tune in April 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern to find out. Thanks, everybody.
Get NIST-Y, yeah, we're bringing the heat. Cyber strong compliance on repeat. Get NIST-Y, let's secure your fate with Blacksmith InfoSec. Don't hesitate.